I don't stop for gas after dark anymore. I plan my routes ahead of time now. I make sure the tank is full before sunset. If the needle is below half and the sun is going down, I find a station on a main road with bright lights and other people around. I will never pull into a dark gas station alone at night again. This happened about 4 years ago. I was driving back from visiting a friend who lived about 3 hours away. I'd left later than I planned. It was already dark by the time I hit the highway, probably around 9:30. The drive was mostly rural, long stretches of 2-lane road cutting through farmland and small towns that were already shut down for the night. About an hour into the drive, I realized I needed gas. The needle was dipping below a quarter tank, and I knew there weren't many stations on this stretch of road. The next one I knew about was a small place just off the highway, a 2-pump station attached to a little convenience store. Not the kind of place I'd normally stop at night, but I didn't have a lot of options. I pulled in around 10:30. The parking lot was gravel, one overhead light that buzzed and flickered. The convenience store window had a dim glow behind it, but I couldn't tell if anyone was inside. There were 2 other vehicles in the lot, a pickup truck parked off to the side and a sedan near the air pump. A few guys were standing around the pickup, 3, maybe 4 of them, leaning against the truck, talking. One of them was smoking. I pulled up to the pump and got out. I tried not to make eye contact. I just wanted to fill up and leave. I swiped my card, put the nozzle in, and stood there watching the numbers tick up. I could feel them looking at me. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on the pump, but I could hear their conversation shift. The tone changed, the volume dropped, and I could feel their attention turn in my direction in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The pump clicked off. I hung up the nozzle, screwed on the gas cap, and got out. Back in my car, I pulled out of the lot and back onto the highway. About 2 minutes later, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. They had appeared quickly, much faster than they should have if someone had just casually pulled out of the station after me. These headlights were close, and they were gaining. I told myself it was nothing. It's a highway. People drive on highways. Someone else leaving the station at the same time as me meant absolutely nothing. I sped up a little, 5 miles over the limit, then 10. The headlights stayed right where they were, same distance, same position. I changed lanes. They changed lanes. I moved back. They moved back. My mouth went dry. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and tried to think. The road ahead was empty, no other cars in either direction. The next town was at least 20 minutes away. There were no businesses, no houses visible from the road. Nothing but dark fields stretching out on both sides. I sped up more. 65, 70, 75. The headlights matched my speed exactly. They weren't trying to pass me. They weren't falling behind. They were maintaining a fixed distance like they were locked on. Then they started flashing their high beams, on, off, on, off. 3 quick bursts, then nothing, then 3 more. I could see the light flooding the inside of my car in waves, throwing shadows across the dashboard and the passenger seat. My hands were trembling on the wheel. Then a horn, a long, sustained blast, then shorter ones, honk, honk, honk. They wanted me to stop. I was fully panicking now. My phone was in my purse on the passenger seat. I fumbled for it with one hand while keeping my eyes on the road. I managed to pull it out and hit the call button on the first number I could think of. My brother picked up on the second ring. My brother is ex-military. He served 2 tours overseas and had been out for about 3 years at this point. He lived about 40 minutes from where I was, in a small house on a dead-end road outside of town. He's calm in ways that most people aren't. The kind of calm that comes from having been in situations where calm is the only thing that keeps you alive. I told him someone was following me. I told him they'd been behind me since the gas station. I told him they were flashing their lights and honking, and I didn't know what to do. Didn't hesitate, he said. Come to my house. Don't go home. Don't stop anywhere else. Drive straight here. I'll be outside. I drove the 40 minutes. Felt like 4 hours. The headlights never left my mirror. Every turn I made, they made. Every speed change they matched. At one point, they got close enough that I could see the outline of the vehicle in my mirror. It was the pickup truck from the gas station. Same truck, same guys. When I turned onto my brother's road, my chest was so tight I could barely breathe. It was a narrow road with no streetlights, lined with trees on both sides. His house was at the end. I could see the porch light was on, and standing in the driveway, illuminated by the light coming from the open garage, was my brother. I pulled in fast and barely got the car in park before I was out the door and running toward him. I was screaming that they were right behind me. The pickup truck came around the last turn and pulled to a stop about 50 feet from the driveway. The engine idled. I could see figures inside, but their headlights were blinding. My brother stepped off the porch. He was holding his rifle, not pointed at them, just holding it, visible, unmistakable. He chambered around. The sound was loud in the quiet of that dead-end road, a clear metallic snap that carried through the night air, and then he raised the barrel toward the sky and fired once. The crack echoed off the tree line and rolled across the fields like thunder. Nothing moved for about 3 seconds, and then the truck's reverse lights came on. It backed up fast, swung around in a hard turn, and accelerated back down the road. I could hear the tires on the gravel even after the taillights disappeared around the bend. My brother stood there, watching the road for a long time after they were gone. He didn't lower the rifle until the sound of the engine had faded completely. I stood in his driveway and cried. Not gently, not quietly. I cried the way you cry when something terrible almost happened, and you're only just beginning to understand how close it was. He brought me inside, made me sit down, made me drink water, called the police. We filed a report. I gave them a description of the truck and the general descriptions of the men I'd seen at the station. The officer said they'd look into it and patrol the area. I never heard anything back. I stayed at my brother's house that night. I didn't drive home until the next afternoon in broad daylight with a full tank of gas. When I got home, I sat in my driveway for 10 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I kept checking the rearview mirror. There was nothing there. That was 4 years ago. I've never stopped at that gas station again. I've never driven that stretch of highway at night. I plan every long drive now, like a military operation. Gas level, route, time of day, stopping points. I know where every well-lit, busy station is between my house and anywhere I regularly drive. People think I'm being dramatic. My friends joke about it. They say I'm paranoid. I've even been told that maybe they were just messing around, just some guys having fun on a dark road. I think about that sometimes. The idea that it was all a joke, that they were just bored and thought it would be funny to scare a woman driving alone. But then I think about the way they watched me at the pump, the way the conversation dropped when I got out of my car, the way they followed me for 40 minutes without ever trying to pass, the way they honked and flashed their lights, trying to get me to pull over on an empty road in the middle of nowhere. And I think about what would have happened if I didn't have a brother to call, if I had pulled over, if I had stopped. I have a very specific rule now. I never open the front door without looking through the peephole first. Not for a delivery driver, not for a neighbor, not for anyone. And if I hear scratching, I don't open the door at all. A couple of years ago, my husband and I lived in a small 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, nice street. The kind of area where people wave when they drive past, and you can leave your garage door open without worrying about it. We had a dog, a big golden retriever named Duke, who was getting up there in age. His hips were starting to bother him, especially going up and down stairs and steps. We used to let him out through the side door that opened into the laundry room, but there was a big step down from the door to the ground, and we noticed it was getting harder on his joints. So we switched to letting him out the front door instead, since the porch was lower and easier for him to manage. We had a long lead attached to a pipe on the corner of the house. We'd clip it to his collar, let him out, and he'd do his business and wander around the front yard for a few minutes before coming back. When he was ready to come inside, he'd walk up to the front door and scratch at it. That was his signal. 1 or 2 scratches, and we knew to let him in. We'd been doing this for months. It was routine. Let him out, wait a few minutes, hear the scratch, open the door, let him in. Every night, same thing. This particular night, my husband was out of town for work. He traveled occasionally, and it was never a big deal. I was comfortable being alone in the house. We lived in a safe neighborhood. I had the dog. I wasn't worried. It was around midnight, and I was getting ready for bed. I figured I'd let Duke out one last time before turning in for the night. I walked to the front door, opened it, clipped his lead to the pipe, and watched him amble out into the yard. He sniffed around the bushes near the porch, wandered toward the side of the house where he usually went, and I closed the door and locked it. I went into the kitchen to put away the dishes from dinner, rinsed a couple of glasses, wiped down the counter. Normal stuff. I figured I had 5 or 10 minutes before Duke would be ready to come back in. He liked to take his time, especially on cool nights when the air felt good. After about 7 or 8 minutes, I heard it. A scratch at the front door. Right on schedule. I dried my hands on a dish towel and walked to the front door. And then I stopped. I don't know exactly why. I've thought about this moment 1,000 times since, and I still can't tell you what made me pause. Maybe it was all the horror movies I'd watched over the years. Maybe it was some instinct I didn't know I had. But instead of reaching for the handle like I normally would, I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. It took my brain a few seconds to understand what I was seeing. It wasn't Duke. There was a man crouched at the base of my front door. He was on his hands and knees, hunched over, with one hand raised to the wood. He was scratching the door with his fingernails. Slowly, deliberately, scratch. Exactly the way Duke did when he wanted to come in. The man wasn't looking at the peephole. His head was down, focused on what he was doing. He was wearing dark clothes, a jacket with the hood pulled up. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could see his hand moving against the door. Back and forth. Scratch. I stopped breathing. My mind raced through a dozen thoughts at once. Where was Duke? How long had this man been out there? Had he been watching the house? Had he seen me let the dog out? Did he know the routine? Had he been watching us do this every night, learning the pattern, waiting for a night when my husband's truck wasn't in the driveway? I took a step back from the door, then another. I moved as slowly and quietly as I could. I didn't want the floor to creak. I didn't want him to know I was standing right there on the other side. I got to the kitchen and picked up my phone. I called 911. I whispered the whole conversation. I told them there was a man at my front door pretending to scratch like my dog to get me to open it. The dispatcher told me to stay away from all doors and windows and that a unit was on the way. I stood in the kitchen with my back against the refrigerator and my phone in my hand, and I waited. I was shaking so badly that I had to hold my wrist with my other hand to keep the phone steady. About a minute after I called, I heard the scratching stop. Then I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, careful footsteps. They moved to the right, toward the living room window. I heard a faint sound, like someone testing the window, pressing on it, checking if it was locked. Then the footsteps moved again, off the porch, down the steps, and then silence. The police arrived about 8 minutes later. 2 officers. They searched the yard, the sides of the house, the back. They checked the street. They didn't find anyone, but they found Duke. He was in the side yard, lying in the grass, still attached to his lead. The lead had been unclipped from the pipe and dragged about 15 feet before getting snagged on a bush. Duke was fine. Confused, but fine. He hadn't been hurt. But someone had unclipped his lead from the pipe and moved him away from the front of the house so that the door would be clear. They had moved my dog so they could take his place. One of the officers asked me what would have happened if I had opened the door without looking. I told him I would have just pulled it open like I always did. I would have been expecting to see my dog sitting there wagging his tail. Instead, I would have been face to face with a stranger crouched on my porch in the dark. The officer nodded and didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. They filed a report. They increased patrols in the area for a couple of weeks. Nothing ever came of it. No one was caught. No neighbors had cameras that caught anything. No one saw anything unusual. My husband came home the next day. We installed cameras that week. Front porch, side yard, back door. All of them with motion alerts sent to both our phones. We built a fenced area in the backyard so Duke could go out without being anywhere near the front of the house. But the thing that haunts me isn't the cameras or the fence or any of the security measures we put in place. The thing that haunts me is how well that person knew our routine. They knew we let the dog out at night. They knew he scratched at the door. They knew the sound. They knew the timing. They knew which nights my husband's truck was gone. Someone had been watching us. For how long, I have no idea. But they knew enough to know exactly how to get me to open that door. And the only reason I didn't is because of a dumb habit I picked up from watching too many scary movies. I think about that a lot. How something so small, so random, can be the difference between opening your front door to a stranger in the dark and not. I still have Duke. He's getting older and slower, and his hips are worse than ever. But he goes out in the backyard now, behind a 6-foot fence, with motion-activated floodlights in every corner. And I never, ever open the front door without looking first.